Greetings, dear listener. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new scary stories and support me with a like. Enjoy listening.
On the outskirts of our city, there is one crappy gas station that is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you're inside, you'll see rows upon rows of low-quality chips, cookies, canned goods, and pickles. There are suspiciously no expiration dates on the cans, as if these cans were placed there many years ago in some misguided attempt to keep track of the flow of goods. A faded, wet floor sign covers a huge crack in the floor next to the refrigerator, where layers of sticky secretions have formed a miniature tar pit containing countless corpses of insects and small rodents. Nobody ever complains about the situation here. Thanks to some strange, bordering on the paranormal coincidence of circumstances, the health inspector repeatedly remained silent about this place, kindly ignoring the easily perceptible smell of some mysterious chemical cocktail that was always inherent in this establishment. It was even more noticeable than the steady mechanical hum emanating from the cold drink machine, which had been installed in the 70s and had never been serviced since. More noticeable than the random pockets of warm and cold air that follow you around, and more annoying than the family of mutated raccoons that lived in the basement right behind the grease pit. At least we think they have mutated. Well, or at least they degenerated to the point of physical deformity and mental inferiority. Their alpha, a muscular 3-foot son of a bitch named Rocco, has been spotted chewing on other people's tires numerous times, and despite being run over at least twice, he keeps coming back. The lingering smell is a sweet combination of honeysuckle, ammonia, and vomit that has never been clearly identified, but there is a theory that the smell comes from underground, penetrating through thin cracks in the concrete that grow and widen every year due to subsidence of the building structure. It is strongest immediately after rain and becomes tear-jerking if you get too close to a drain, where even Rocco and his clan refuse to set foot. If you go inside, at some point you may see a cowboy from the restroom. He is something of an urban legend here, and only appears if you are alone and unaware of anything. What makes it truly legendary are the stories people tell after such an encounter. Entries about him range from pretty weird to incredibly bizarre. For example, the guy last month who went to the toilet but changed his mind when he saw a cowboy standing next to the urinal, dressed in a duster, bandana, boots, and leather pants, holding a bunch of different balloon animals. Or a couple of weeks later, another client walked into the same restroom and saw a man, dressed only in a cowboy hat, family briefs, and boots with spurs, literally sharpening an axe on an old-fashioned stone grinder. When he came in, the cowboy stopped, looked up at him with a smile, raised his hat, and said, "Come on, what have you got there?" If you're lucky enough to see a ghostly cowboy haunting the restroom, don't worry. He's harmless and actually quite polite. Honestly, he's not that bad, especially compared to other things that happen in this place. When you find yourself inside this gas station, your teeth can instantly hurt. It's a strangely common phenomenon that no one fully understands. The pain goes away on its own after a couple of hours. If you actually walk inside, you'll almost certainly see me sitting behind the counter. The thing is, I'm the only full-time employee and I'm here almost always. You may notice that I am reading a book. This is because the internet for some reason does not work here and cell phone service is either unreliable or not available at all. If you need to make a call, you can get out and walk up the hill, preferably back towards the direction of town because the other road will take you into the forest and you absolutely don't need to know why going there is a bad idea. Or you can pay me 25 cents a minute and use the store phone. This rule was set by the owners and I need to enforce it because they check phone records. Sorry. While you're here, don't be offended if I don't talk to you, because to be completely honest, I don't always know exactly how real whoever walks through these doors is, and if I had accurate knowledge about everyone in this place, who could be a real person, I would go crazy. And we don't need that anymore here. I guess I just want to say that strange things happened to me while working at this dingy gas station on the edge of town. I wish I could tell you about the strangest things that have ever happened here, but I doubt I'll ever get around to it. There were simply too many of them. I saw a total of 4 coffins inside the store, in 3 different situations. I met at least a dozen people trudge back into town from the woods, claiming to have escaped from aliens or government conspirators or something like that. They had no money, but they needed to call, and I could just let them use the store phone before they found them again. But rules are rules, and I'm not going to lose my job just because you escaped captivity without taking your change with you. And of course, Farmer Brown, yes, that's his real name, who got mad at us and complained about the feed we ordered for him. He claimed that there was something wrong with the product because, as he explained, all of his animals suddenly had human faces. We agreed with him, providing a significant discount on a couple of his next orders. Soon after, he stopped coming and his remains were found in a locked bedroom of his farmhouse. As far as I know, this case has not yet been solved. Anyway, I can probably come back with a story or two, but for now, I need to get ready for work. Part 2. On the outskirts of our city, there is one crappy gas station that is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and sometimes longer. If you walk inside, you'll likely see a tired cashier sitting at the front desk, trying his best to mind his own business. I've been working at this gas station almost 7 days a week since I left school, and at this point I doubt I'll be able to leave if I want to. Not long ago, my doctor recommended that I start keeping a journal, and after some thought, I decided I could give it a try. Traditional treatment does not seem to have any effect, but enough about me. Let's get back to the interesting stuff, to the gas station. I spent a good portion of my shift last night trying to decide how I should start this journal. Where can I start so that this all makes at least some sense? How can I explain this gas station to someone who has never experienced it? I've tried to tell some of my stories before, so I know what to expect. People don't believe it, or they don't want to believe. I still remember how difficult it was last year when I had to call the sheriff's station and explain to the new girl that half a pig had broken into the store and was running around breaking things and screaming in the voice of an old woman. Yes, I mean half a pig. Yes, pigs. Front half. No, this is not a joke. I'm at a gas station. I mean, what gas station? Is this your first day, or what? First day? In that case, can I please talk to someone else? Finally, she connected me with Tom. He's a deputy who drew the short straw a few years ago and ended up in the official position of gas station manager. This was before he went completely gray. Tom has worked here long enough that all I have to say when he answers the phone is, "This is half a pig. She won't stop screaming and I can't catch her." Then he grumbles, mutters something about how this whole thing is pretty fucking weird and rides out to help me catch her. Tom is a good guy. I asked around, but no one in the area knew where the pig came from. Farmer Brown, who was still alive at the time, came to watch and give his expert opinion. According to the farmer, the pig was somehow chopped right down the middle, but thanks to some miracle, none of the internal organs were damaged. There was nothing supernatural about it, just very unusual. She remained at the local elementary school as something of a mascot for the summer until a scientist and his team from somewhere up north offered the school $1,000 in exchange for the pig. For science, I guess. I don't want to sound stupid, but my point is that it's hard to believe some of these stories if you haven't been inside this gas station at least once. And perhaps you were. We are the only gas station for miles around here. We are quite close to some major crossroads. If you've ever driven through an unfamiliar part of the country and found yourself lost, it's possible that you might have found yourself at my door, looking to fill up your tank or get directions. If you have a strange memory of a strange place that somehow doesn't fit with the setting, then there's a chance that we actually met. It was late into my night shift when I decided to start writing. As I took notes on some of my weirder memories of the place, I made a conscious decision to eliminate the ones that were so outlandish that they weren't worth wasting anyone else's time on. I call them try to forget stories. I was writing all this down in the receipt book when Carlos interrupted me. Carlos is one of the temporary workers at the gas station. We have quite a long list of temporary workers here. Owners love to hire freelancers, vagabonds, hitchhikers, random passers-by, and criminals looking for work for a couple of days. In fact, I try not to get to know them. They come and go within a couple of days or sometimes after a couple of weeks, rarely after long enough for any meaningful relationship to form. But there is Carlos, who has been working here for almost a year. He got a job in the prison work program, unloaded trucks twice a week, and was the only one of the 12 prisoners who didn't disappear during last December's freak snowstorm, but that doesn't really matter to me. Carlos served his time, and when he was released, he came back to work here, cleaning the store and unloading trucks. He comes in 6 times a day for all of his 30-minute shifts. Now that I think about it, I'm not entirely sure what he does during those shifts. The store is never clean and the trucks only come twice a week, only during the day, due to an agreement made as a result of one incident. Maybe one day I'll ask Carlos what kind of work he does. All I know is that of everyone I know here, he's the most like my friend. When Carlos approached me at my workplace last night, I knew something unusual was going on. He was sweating profusely, was pale, and looked like he was about to lose consciousness. He kept looking back at the man in the suit who had wandered into the store and was standing next to the cold drink machine. Carlos said, "We need to talk." Now I told him, "Go ahead," but he refused to say anything until I followed him into the freezer. I usually hate leaving the front of the store unattended. We have random shoplifters. Plus, one day Rocco snuck in and made off with 2 cartons of cigarettes. But Carlos looked serious, so I made an exception for him. Once we were in the chilling safety of the freezer, Carlos asked me if I had seen the guy in the suit. I said I saw him. He asked if I knew the guy. I said that I once saw him in the city. His name was Kiefer. He participated in some elections, I don't remember exactly which ones, and stopped near a gas station from time to time. He drove an old black SUV that only took premium gas. I hadn't heard much about him around town, but he was definitely a local. His picture was on the trophy display at my school, in memory of one of the competitions he won many years before I entered there. I guess we had a lot to be proud of. I knew about Kiefer, but we didn't know each other. After I told Carlos all this, he shook his head and said, "No, it can't be Kiefer." I asked, "Why not?" And Carlos answered me, "It can't be Kiefer because Kiefer has been dead for 2 days. His body is now in the trunk of my car." That's when things got really weird. It was a very strange night. Between the plant hands, Farmer Jr., and that cultist who wouldn't leave me alone, I barely managed to get my thoughts together. And of course, on top of all this, there was also that situation with Carlos. I promise I'll come back and tell you about it, but first I need to grab some coffee. Part 3. There are times when our world drifts so close to the fabric of reality that I can hear something calling me from beyond the veil. Sometimes, when I get too close, I can feel this something on the other side reaching into the deepest corners of my consciousness. I'm worried about Carlos. He doesn't seem to take it very well. When I returned to work after yesterday's shift, I was pleased to find a stack of receipts lying on the cash desk with notes written in my clumsy handwriting. I don't remember writing all these notes, but I honestly don't remember a lot of things. Maybe I'm just working too hard. Or perhaps the fumes released from the gas station played a cruel joke on me. Or maybe it's just another side effect of my condition. In any case, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, or any other donated animal in any other places, for that matter. Honestly, my handwriting leaves much to be desired, and sometimes scratches on receipt paper become almost indistinguishable. Therefore, If anything below seems incredible to you, it is most likely simply because I transferred something incorrectly. With that in mind, here is my best attempt at transcribing these entries. 7 o'clock. It starts to get dark earlier. 7:30. Farmer Jr. came to the gas station last night and asked about plant hands. I said they are no more. He left his number on a 15-cent discount coupon for feed from an online store. I think he wants to tell me something. 9 o'clock. I think some kids are trying to prank me. I found a garden gnome right behind the rows of pork rinds. I thought nothing of it and put it in the box behind the cash register. Then I found another similar garden gnome in a soda box. I also put it in the box. I had no suspicions until the discovery of the third and fourth gnomes. I was taking out the trash and found 2 gnomes standing on a tree branch, looking at me like gargoyles. With the help of a chair and a broom, I managed to knock them down and put them in a box with the other 2. Returning to my desk, I saw a note written in red ink lying on my chair. It only said, "I am within the walls." I don't know who wrote this, but the paper smelled of oranges and plumeria. 10 o'clock. Some kind of grinding noise is heard from the tiles above the cash register. I'm afraid Rocco and his brood may have broken into the building again. 11 o'clock. Farmer Jr. called the store. I asked about plant hands. I assured him that they were no longer there and that, if they appeared, I would definitely call him. I think he's starting to suspect that I'm lying. 12 o'clock. One of the cultist recruits came from their forest community. They get mad when I call them cultists. I know that recruits are not allowed to interact with the outside world, but from time to time they sneak into town, never go beyond this gas station, and buy cigarettes. They shouldn't try to recruit new members until they have achieved the honorary status of senior cultist, but this cultist wasn't very good. I know they shouldn't have names, but I'll call this one Marlboro. I think you can guess why. Marlboro was in the store for at least half an hour trying to convince me to go to their camp with him. They get mad when I call their house a camp. He tried to appeal to my logic, but I firmly and politely explained to him that logic does not interest me. I can't remember when he left. 2 o'clock. I find myself digging again. Sometimes, during the longest nights, I allow myself to doze off. My mind slowly turns off, and when I come to my senses, I wonder, where was I just now? Who controlled my movements when I was not there? My body has done these actions so many times that it seems to have learned to do them without me. It restocked cigarette shelves, turned the cold drink dispenser, scraped mold from the bottom of ice buckets, emptied rat traps, and somewhere along the way, my body found a shovel, went outside, and started digging a hole. It's actually incorrect to say that my body started to dig. I, or rather, my body, continued to dig this hole again and again for several months. I usually come to my senses after a few shovel movements. This time I added another foot of depth before I woke up and asked myself, what the hell am I doing? 3:30. I just noticed a door at the end of the hallway, right behind the freezer. How long have I worked here and not noticed this door? It looks depressingly ordinary as a door can be, except for the fact that it feels warm and vibrates. I tried to open it, but the door was closed. Returning to my workplace, I noticed a man in an overcoat standing behind the gas pumps, not far from our lamps, dangerously close to the road. I can't tell for sure whether he's looking at me or at the building in the woods on the other side. I wish he didn't stand there like that, calm and unwavering, with his hands reaching well below his knees. The grinding sound from the tiles above the cash register gets louder. 3:45. A man walked into the store, pulling a large suitcase filled with ice. He had sunken blue eyes, straight nose and ear hair, long bony fingers, and paper-thin skin that exposed every blue-green vein beneath a translucent dermis. He wore a bowler hat and smelled of milk. I definitely haven't seen it here before. The man asked if we would be interested in partnering with him. He offered ground beef at very low prices, but I told him that our store wasn't doing very well in the fresh food category and recommended that he try his hand at making jerky. Before leaving, he scooped up about a pound of raw mince from his suitcase, placed it on a piece of parchment, and gave it to me as a sample. After the man left, I took the meat to the refrigerator, where another garden gnome was waiting for me. I put the gnome in the box with the other 7. 4 o'clock. Carlos told me something very strange about Kiefer. 4:30. There was a guy in our town named Spencer Middleton who went to the same high school as Kiefer and I. Spencer was only a year ahead of me, but I looked much older and acted much younger than him. I live in a small town, and small towns can sometimes be boring. Some people spread rumors for fun, others engage in even more unseemly pastimes. The latter often feed the former. There were rumors around town that Spencer liked to torture and kill animals. Rumors were that Spencer's parents and siblings locked their bedroom doors at night. The rumors did not diminish even after the fire in Spencer's house, from which only he managed to escape unharmed. One day I saw Spencer happily step on a lizard, throw its head back, and laugh. Some time later, after a fire occurred in his house, Spencer left town. It is generally accepted that he left to join the army. I didn't know what to think about it, so I just didn't think about it. And I wouldn't think about it anymore, but after all these years I have to. Because Spencer Middleton just came into our store and bought a cup of coffee. He sits at one of the counters and talks to Kiefer. Marlboro is back. He asked if I could spare some time to talk to him about his fake religion. They get mad when I call their religion fake. I told him he needed to leave. He looked upset. 4:30. There was a guy in our town named Spencer Middleton who went to the same high school as Kiefer and I. Spencer was only a year ahead of me, but I looked much older and acted much younger than him. I live in a small town, and small towns can sometimes be boring. Some people spread rumors for fun. Others engage in even more unseemly pastimes. The latter often feed the former. There were rumors around town that Spencer liked to torture and kill animals. Rumors were that Spencer's parents and siblings locked their bedroom doors at night. The rumors did not diminish even after the fire in Spencer's house, from which only he managed to escape unharmed. 4:45. Spencer and Kiefer sat around for a while and bought nothing but 2 cups of coffee. When they finally left, I reported all this to Carlos. He was hiding under a blanket in the freezer, although I'm not entirely sure why. Carlos explained to me exactly what happened. He had finished his shift a couple of nights ago and was about to leave the gas station when he saw Kiefer's SUV stopped in a ditch at the bottom of the hill. Carlos, being the good guy he is, decided to go and see if Kiefer needed any help. He said that as he stood up and got out of the car, he heard what sounded like a loud crunching sound coming from outside the woods. Carlos went to check. That's when he saw something. When I asked Carlos what he saw, he just started speaking panikedly and quickly in Spanish. I don't know Spanish, but I nodded politely. The only word I managed to remember was Strega, which was the name of the liqueur we sold. Whatever it was that Carlos saw made him rush to his car as fast as he could and quickly drive away. That's when he ran over Kiefer. Carlos is a good guy, but he found himself in a bad situation. He stopped long enough to get out and check on Kiefer and make sure he was definitely dead. Carlos couldn't do anything about it. It was an accident. Carlos was on parole. There was this thing in the forest and Carlos had to make a decision, so he loaded the body into the trunk of his car and drove off. He took me to his car to show me the body. I can confirm 100% that it was Kiefer in his trunk, not only because of his easily recognizable face, but also because of the phone and wallet that were in his pockets. 5 o'clock. I finally got tired of the grinding and took the ladder out of storage to see what the raccoons were doing above the ceiling, but when I removed the tiles, the only thing there was another gnome. There are already a dozen of them. 6 o'clock. The man in the coat is still standing outside. The cultist returned, demanding to speak with me and insisting that if I just listened to him, I would understand that his explanations were excellent and flawless, and that I would simply be a fool if I did not agree with him on the perfection of logic and nirvana that the structure represents his beliefs. I agreed to listen to his presentation if he asked the man in the coat to leave. After making a hasty verbal contract, I forced myself to listen to him. To be fair, he said some of the right things, but I guess that's what you'd expect from a viral thought experiment powerful enough to convince perfectly normal people to leave their normal lives and live in a commune in the woods near a dingy gas station on the edge of town. They call themselves mathematicians. They believe that humanity exists to perform only two tasks: reduce the amount of suffering and increase the amount of happiness. Right living increases the amount of happiness in the world more than it increases the amount of suffering. A decent life reduces the amount of suffering more than it reduces the amount of happiness. How good a person is determined by the difference in increased happiness and decreased suffering. Obviously, if an individual exhibits a negative difference, that is, if a person has increased more suffering than happiness, or if he has decreased more happiness than suffering, then this indicates that this individual is simply bad. Therefore, if a person causes a significant amount of happiness and suffering, he can simply determine which is more and use this simple system to determine whether he is good or bad. Simple, isn't it? Mathematicians believe that our world has always perceived good and bad in the wrong way. For eons, we have tried to increase the amount of happiness when we should have been focusing instead on reducing the amount of suffering. Because happiness is a fickle concept, the more happiness you create, the harder it is to maintain, as happiness has a clear set of diminishing returns. Suffering, however, is constant. Suffering is the result of the end of happiness. Suffering is pure and eternal. For mathematicians to be supremely good, they must put an end to all suffering. Therefore, mathematicians are working on a bomb to destroy the entire planet. With the destruction of life on Earth, they will prevent an endless amount of suffering in the future. With every life they take, an entire lineage of people who would have been born to live a life of suffering will never exist. Every murder is a mercy killing. Every happy moment will no longer be a pale spot on the face of all the sad moments which are also prevented. So, as Marlborough explains, their death cult believes that killing is kindness. I told him that his ideas were stupid, that he was stupid, and that now he needed to go and tell the man in the coat to get out. 6:30, the phone rang. This is strange for two reasons. Firstly, because it was not a landline phone. It was a mobile phone, despite the fact that we don't have mobile reception here. And secondly, because it was not just a mobile phone. It was the phone I took from Kiefer's corpse. I'll admit, I've been in a bit of a bind ever since Carlos confessed. On the one hand, Carlos killed someone. On the other hand, it was an accident, but the parole officer might not have realized it. I thought I would have more time to think, but when the phone rang, it became necessary to make a decision. I picked up the phone. I didn't speak first. The voice from the other end was familiar to me. "You have something that belongs to my boss." It was Spencer Middleton. "His phone and wallet," I answered. "What? No, we don't care about that crap. We can buy more phones and more wallets. You know what we want." He was right. I knew. "It was an accident," I explained. "We know. We want to make a deal. You give it back to us, and we will pretend that nothing happened." "So it is possible?" "Of course. 7:30. Carlos showed up for his shift half an hour ago, and I outlined the deal to him. He was not happy, but I clearly explained that he had no choice. We parked Carlos's Camry right behind a gas station near a patch of hand plants and stood far enough away to avoid being grabbed by the ankles. Kiefer's SUV showed up a couple of minutes later. Spencer was driving. He and Kiefer came out without a word, walked with us, and opened the back of their car. Carlos opened the trunk. Kiefer and I looked into each other's eyes the entire time Carlos and Spencer moved the body from one car to another. Spencer had a tarp and blanket to cover everything. When it was over, Kiefer put his hand on my chest and whispered in my ear, "You did great." Then they left. Carlos started crying. I went back to the store. It was almost daytime, and a new temporary worker was soon to arrive to relieve me. 8 o'clock. The new temp was running late, so I stayed late for my lunch break. I spent overtime putting price tags on all the garden gnomes. I put them in the other items section for $9.99 each and have already sold a couple. I'm a very good worker. 8:30. I went to the restroom and saw a man there with jeans down to his ankles. He wore red and white plaid family briefs and a cowboy hat. The cowboy smiled when he saw me and only said, "Well, come on, what do you have there?" I took the opportunity to ask him about something that was subconsciously bothering me. "Do you think everything will be okay?" The restroom cowboy thought for a second, then pulled up his pants, fastened his huge belt buckle, and walked past me, his spurs clanking on the toilet tiles. He stopped for a second when he was right next to me and said clearly, "I appreciate it." Then he left. I have no idea what this means. These are all notes from receipt papers, but I am determined to continue writing this diary. I think this would be a great way to chronicle all the weird things that happen at a gas station. Perhaps this will help improve my condition, but I'm not sure. Next time something weird happens, I'll probably come back and write more. I think it will be continued. Correction. I apologize. Upon further inspection, I realized that some of the entries on the receipt papers may have been transferred incorrectly. I also made a couple of spelling adjustments and fixed some typos. I added another typo along the way for the observant reader. Finally, on the advice of some of my readers, I removed the part where I wrote Farmer Jr.'s social security number and address. Also, special thanks to the reader who pointed out that strega is not actually a Spanish word. I asked Carlos about it when he came in for his 4th shift today, but Carlos just looked at me blankly and said he didn't speak Spanish. Part 5, I would like to start this post by apologizing to all those who read the 4th part. I had no idea it would turn out this way. Authorities assured me that all traces of the story had been removed from the internet and that there was nothing more to worry about. If you are unlucky enough to read Part 4, I beg you, for your own good, try to forget about everything. If you experience nosebleeds, dizziness, migraines, or hallucinations, call an ambulance immediately. If you have recurring dreams about an island made from a song, do not, under any circumstances, approach the blue door with a raven design or try to open it. If you haven't read Part 4, there is no Part 4. She doesn't exist. Forget everything you've ever heard about her. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. By now, you're probably aware that there's a crappy gas station on the edge of our small town, and that strange things happen there. The city council personally asked me to stop talking about it, as there were some astute readers who not only used the brief descriptions I gave to track down our little town, but actually came and visited me at work. I heard that one of them joined the mathematicians, and as far as I know, the other 2 are still missing. Sorry again. I'm not working at the moment. This is the first official break I've had since I started writing down my stories on receipt paper. Time passes funny here. Slow and fast at the same time, like shotgun molasses. It's good that I started keeping a diary. I have a few minutes before my laptop dies, and I think now is a great time to move my journal entries before the battery dies or I bleed to death. Right now, it's a competition to see what comes first. Before anyone gets worried, I already called Tom. Tom said that he would come here and take me to the hospital right after he delivered lunches to the orphans of Ledford, John Ben, and Little Sister. Tom and the other officers take turns checking on them and serving them food, trying to make the whole situation a little less tragic. These orphans have been living on their own since An incident that clearly didn't happen, and anyone who thinks otherwise is just a damn liar. Well, I'm getting distracted again. I think it's time to get down to business and retype the entries from my diary while I still can. November 17th, 02, 21 o'clock. So much has happened since the Halloween incident that we're not allowed to talk about. Dealing with the aftermath of the incident as well as the cult kept me much busier than usual. Mathematicians clear out our shelves daily, planning some secret event that I can only hear about in hushed mutters and whispers. It starts to get dark earlier, and the weather gets colder. November 17th, 03. 2 o'clock. The man in the coat returned. He just stands in front of the front door and watches for almost an hour. On the one hand, since he showed up, no buyers have come to me. On the other hand, I can't help but feel like he's trying to put some thoughts into my head. However, he won't succeed. I've practiced resisting this too much. Even before sunset, Kiefer came in to drink coffee and sit for a while. After some time, Spencer Middleton also came. Spencer spoke to Kiefer and then rushed to the register, screaming at the top of his lungs. He grabbed a bunch of lottery tickets and scattered them all over the room. Obviously, something upset him. At this point, I took out my earplugs. "Everything is fine?" I asked stupidly. After all, I knew very well that nothing is ever normal. "Did you hear what I just said?" Spencer asked. I explained to him that I had to wear earplugs to muffle the sounds of screams that periodically came from the ventilation. It looks like the screams stopped some time ago, or I just imagined them. In any case, earplugs were no longer needed. At that moment, Tom entered the store. His gray hair looked even grayer than usual. Spencer, I noticed, immediately noticed the presence of a police officer. "Where is he?" he said in a half-whisper, half-roar. "Where is the other one?" "Carlos?" I asked. Spencer nodded. "Exactly. Carlos. He won't be here for another 20 minutes. When he shows up, tell him we need to chat." After that, Spencer Middleton flew out of the store with a high-pitched whistle. Kiefer immediately jumped up from his seat and followed him. Tom helped me clean up the mess and put the lottery tickets back in place without asking a question. I wish more people were like Tom. When Carlos came to work, he told me that he was having strange dreams about something huge, living, breathing underground. The dreams always end the same way. The gas station falls into a huge funnel. I told Carlos that Spencer was looking for him. Then Carlos became gloomy and said that he wanted to show me something. In the freezer behind a pile of boxes marked non a priori, whatever that means, they've been there since I got this job, there was a blanket. And under this blanket lay another Kiefer. My first question to Carlos was, "Did you steal the body back?" He looked down and shook his head sheepishly, like a little kid who had just been caught making meth. "Did you kill another one?" I asked. Carlos explained. "It was an accident. Again." 3 o'clock. The man in the coat finally left. He left scratches on the glass of the front door. I checked the CCTV footage to confirm my suspicions, but he was always out of sight of the cameras. Why can't I remember what his face looked like? 3:30. Marlboro was the first customer in the store after the man in the coat left. I told him that the fact that he was still alive surprised me. He took it as a compliment and replied, "Thank you." I asked him if he was ready for the big event, but in response he just looked at me blankly. I realized that Marlboro didn't know what I was talking about, so I told him everything I knew. Unusual cult activity, whispering, buying supplies. I was sure that something was about to happen. Marlboro's face turned pale as I spoke. Then he ran out of the gas station with a 99-cent cocktail in his hands before I could finish. I know I need to write a report about the theft, but I just can't bring myself to do it. It's hard to explain, but there's something about Marlboro that makes me truly feel sorry for him. 6 o'clock, I started digging again. I don't know how long I did this or who ran the store while I was gone. The hole has become so deep that I can barely get out of it on my own. Perhaps I should consider asking the doctor if this behavior is normal. 8 o'clock. Marlborough is currently crying in a dry storage closet. I can barely hear the story through his sobs. Marlborough was sent on some vision quest last week, and he has no idea what the rest of the cultists were procuring for. When he returned to the camp tonight, he found it completely deserted. The beds were not made. There was food on some of the plates. The fire was still burning in the fireplace. The clothes were still in their personal milk crates next to their sleeping bags. But the people, all the people, simply disappeared. Marlborough doesn't handle it very well, but I have a job to do, so I asked Carlos to help me move it to the dry storage area. I think he should think about it for a while, and then he'll just, I don't know, go home. November 17th, 04. 21 o'clock. The fighters have just left. They said they caught all the snakes this time, but I have my doubts. November 17th, 05. 17 o'clock. Today, Kiefer came into the store again with his veiled threats. He also asked about Carlos, but I told him that I was tired of being a mediator and that if he had something to do with Carlos, then he needed to discuss it with Carlos himself. At this point, Kiefer began to behave strangely. You know this place is just a big experiment and you're a lab rat here? I told Kiefer to buy something or leave, so he bought a packet of toothpaste and then proceeded to undress and smear the toothpaste all over his naked body. They said there was something wrong with your head. This is true? I tried to be polite and look away from what was happening, so I replied, yeah. Do you have any special mental condition? I answered yeah again. This is bad. By that time, Kiefer was already completely naked. He went to the cold drink dispenser, filled a large glass with the red sugar mixture, and then poured it over his head. After that, he shook himself sharply like a wet dog, scattering pieces of wet, cold, and sticky fragments on everything, from the ceiling to the walls. Some even got on my face, but I tried not to let him see me flinch. I knew this was all just an attempt to intimidate me, and I didn't want to give him any satisfaction. What exactly is this? Kiefer asked, returning to the pile of clothes that awaited him. What? I asked. What is your condition? Schizophrenia? Protoponia? Meningitis? Gay? No, I replied. I'm not sleeping. Are you awake? He sounded really interested. Like, in general? I cannot fall asleep. I haven't slept a day since leaving school. It's a rare genetic disorder that can't be cured, and one day it will kill me. But until then, I will deal with the side effects as best I can. Kiefer nodded. So that's what it's all about. That's why he can't get to you. Why? Who can't reach me? At that moment, Spencer entered the store. He threw a blanket over Kiefer and sent him into the SUV. A second later, he returned to the store and offered me $100 for the CCTV tape from that night. I wonder what I'll spend my 100 on. 21 o'clock. I began to suspect that something was wrong with the store. I found empty candy wrappers scattered everywhere, CCTV footage mysteriously deleted, strange noises coming from the walls in the middle of the night when I should be alone. At least more strange noises than usual. At first I thought they were just raccoons, but now I know the truth. I know Marlborough has been living here for the last 2 days. He would simply come out of the storage closet in his robe, nod at me, grab a stick of jerky, and go to the toilet. It didn't even occur to me that it was Marlborough who never left. November 17th, 06. 4 o'clock. It finally happened. I guess it was just a matter of time. I know I should feel regret or shame or whatever emotion normal people feel when something like this happens, but all I feel is embarrassment. I came to my senses a couple of hours ago with a shovel in my hands. I dug again, and this time I made some serious progress. The pit was at least 7 feet deep, and the sheer walls were already made of loose red clay. It took me a moment to realize that I was looking into an inky black night sky strewn with countless stars. As the largest celestial bodies began to move, I realized that these stars were actually just the soulless red eyes of mutated raccoons staring at me from the edge of the pit. These unscrupulous beggars were probably just looking for food. As soon as I threw the shovel out of the hole, I heard this sound. Imagine the sound you get when you hit a watermelon with a butcher knife. Such a hard, wet, squelching sound. Now imagine the watermelon gurgling and falling to the ground like a sack of potatoes. It seems this metaphor has led me a little astray. When I crawled out of the hole, I saw a shovel standing upright. The blade was firmly stuck inside the open chest wound of the still twitching Kiefer. Kiefer died before I got close to him. In a final act of defiance, he turned his 2 middle fingers in my direction. I felt a modicum of respect for him before I entered a psychological state that I can only describe as suppressed panic. The first thing I wanted to do was find something to wrap the body with, because apparently Spencer Middleton would be coming for it soon. When I went to the gas station, I was surprised to find that Marlboro had taken over the cash register job while I was away. He served one of our regulars, Charles, a big fat man who was always buying soap and boiled peanuts. I grabbed the tarp from the shelf and took it outside. That's when I discovered something new. Kiefer is heavy, like very heavy. I understand that the human body is just a fleshy ball of water filled with guts and excrement, but nothing prepared me for how gross and heavy a dead thing can be. By some miracle, I was able to sneak Kiefer from the door to the freezer without being noticed. It took all my strength to place the body behind the boxes in a pile with the other 3. When I did finish, I was sweating enough that even the cold of the freezer wasn't enough to cool me down. I stood there trying to regulate my breathing and get rid of the surging adrenaline, summing up this whole situation. Then it finally dawned on me. There were 4 Kiefers on the floor of the freezer. 4. Kiefer. Where the hell did 2 more come from? The door to the freezer opened and Marlboro walked in, dragging another Kiefer by the legs. When he saw all the Kiefers under my feet, I said the first thing that came to my mind. It turned out somehow awkward. Marlboro and I decided to open a bottle of Strega liqueur and drink a little. He explained to me that he accidentally killed Kiefer several times. I understand him completely. This guy is too easy to kill. At one point, Carlos came in to pick up a box of cookie dough. He didn't even notice all the Kiefers. My laptop currently has 2% battery. Obviously, I don't have time to retype the rest of my diary before it goes dark. I don't have time to tell you how I ended up at the bottom of that hole under the store and broke my leg. But I can definitely say that I hear someone moving above me, and this is good because it means that I am not alone here. If you are reading this, then I managed to post my story. If you're not reading this, then I don't know who you even are. Someone just called out to me from the top of the cliff. I think it was Carlos. I wonder what happened to Tom. Why didn't Tom come? Now that I think about it, I remember that Tom didn't survive the Halloween incident. I promise that if I live long enough to recharge my battery, I'll come back and tell you the rest. Until then, I believe, to be continued. In the evening, I went to take out the trash and saw a man in a raincoat. I don't know why he comes to the gas station and why I've never been able to get a good look at him. He stood at the very edge of the forest, behind the garbage containers, and, as usual, watched. I decided that I would take a look today, too. His skeletal grin crossed the center of his entire noseless face from ear to ear. Tiny, milky white eyes looked beady from behind greasy bangs that fell right down to his goatee. An incredibly wide mouth divided the head into greasy hair on top and wet flesh below. His legs bent in a strange way. People don't bend like that, and on all fours he rushed off into the forest. The next night is much calmer than usual. Yesterday the package arrived. I left it on the counter, where it is now. Judging by the stamp, I am the recipient. I don't know the sender's address. A rectangular package wrapped like a Christmas present with red and yellow ribbons, quite heavy. A dead cat would fit nicely there, in my opinion. Further events developed so quickly that it was very difficult to understand what was happening. Something grew out of the wall closest to us, something huge, shaped like a hand. It grabbed everyone except me and pulled me into the wall, and I fell. The ground opened up beneath me and I slid down a dark tunnel. No, I was pulled, or even swallowed it. This went on for some time. Dirt filled my nose, mouth, and ears, and then whatever was swallowing me there spat on me on a damp, rocky patch of ground. I landed on my bad leg and most likely broke it again. I thought at least I managed to hit Spencer this time. At least some progress compared to last week, especially considering the last passing seconds of life. The room I was in was cool, but not cold, and cavernous. I could hear the sound of my breathing echoing off the walls. By the way, I heard not only my own breathing. Suddenly I became aware of someone else's presence here. The creature is in this room with me. It's difficult to explain, just as difficult as explaining a dream right after you wake up. You have to go through it to understand, but it feels like suddenly entering someone else's mind who will broadcast their thoughts directly into your head. But who knows? Maybe this is all again the consequences of taking medications. Welcome to my abode, a voice sounded from somewhere in the absolute darkness. I really regret that our personal meeting was postponed for so long. I don't see anything. Well, yes, but how did you imagine the meeting with the dark deity? Oh shit, I'm in the throne room of the dark god and he's talking like an internet troll. However, this is not entirely meaningless. Maybe we'll still be able to get out. Maybe there is still an option with light so that I can at least see who I'm talking to. He sighed in a very human way and replied, "Okay." Out of nowhere, the entire room turned into a powerful, furious bright light. Light was all I could see. I closed my eyes and put my hands to my face, only to see the bones in my hands through my skin and eyelids, and despite the medications, it was painful. "Too bright! Too bright!" I shouted. "Can we have some kind of compromise?" "Wow," the voice replied. "I didn't expect you to act like a child." And then, just as suddenly, the brightness subsided. My pupils quickly adjusted and I was able to see what I was talking to. "Behold," it exclaimed, "and fear the dark deity." He, I'm guessing it was a he based on the voice, was the size of an elephant, plump and round with a dark yellow hide. Most of all, it looked like a giant tick, with 6 rows of short legs on each side, 6 rows of drooping breasts, and a human-sized head on top. The head had an almost human face and no neck. The body touched the ground with the widest part of the torso, as if half buried. Well, in addition to all this, he had a red mohawk. He smiled at me. "Well, what do you think?" "About what?" "About the hairstyle. Isn't it amazing?" He pointed to his mohawk. "Well, sort of." "Like? Can you imagine how much effort went into this hairstyle? Although you know what, screw him. I shouldn't have even tried to impress you. My mistake." "Okay," I said, trying to get up only to remember my broken leg. I was high, underground, unable to move, and had no weapon. There was no chance to get out. If you're planning on killing me, let's do it quickly already. What's wrong with you people? Such disbelief, such prejudices. Why does any encounter with something unknown become a kill or be killed situation for you? I'm not the monster here. You. I can look straight into your soul. I see your sins. Do you remember how, at 15, you scratched the director's car with a key? No. Seriously? Maybe it wasn't you. People all look the same. Why am I here? Why did you drag me underground? Because, Jack, there is no other way I can talk to you. I would like to ask you to stop killing my children. You burned so many of my offspring, but why, we didn't do anything to you. Kefir plants. Yes, spare takes. This idiot is so clumsy. but they are harmless. I want to infiltrate my man into the local government to gain some political power in this terrible little town. To take over the world later? I asked. Although I have already begun to understand where this dialogue is going. No, I wanted to put pressure on the city council to curb the extent of deforestation. I'm trying to save the world, and you and your terrible friends are killing my children and trying to blow me up. What about Spencer? He cut me into meat. Here he is terrible and he obeys you. Well, forgive me for believing in people's ability to improve. I hired Spencer because I needed someone to protect Kiefer, and I very clearly ordered him not to kill anyone, to which he agreed. You killed a bunch of people. Cultists, for example. The whole camp. Yes, but actually no. I'm not happy to tell you this, but they killed themselves. It was a sad mass suicide, however. But in my opinion, such an outcome was quite expected if you believe what they were talking about. You should have realized long ago where everything was going. Well, just think about it. Consequentialism mixed with the moral duty to end all suffering. He gestured with one of his 6 hands to jerk off and continued. Well, I didn't want all these adult, fully formed bodies to go to waste. Can you imagine how difficult it is to create such a body from scratch? In general, it's not easy at all. So, why send them to the gas station after us? Yes, again, this heroic complex of self-centeredness. I didn't send them for you. I sent them to get Spencer's body back as quickly as possible, hoping to restore it before the brain was seriously damaged. Next time you see him, maybe you should apologize for everything that happened. I swear, Romero made zombies super popular, and now, if anyone sees how a dead person is resurrected, they immediately rush to kill him again. Whatever happened to the concept of a miracle? Anyone went crazy when Christ was resurrected. Do you want to say that Christ is like these mathematicians? Just an animate body? Jack, is this really what you want to argue about now? Yes, but doesn't the dark deity itself mean evil? He sighed. During my last awakening, the dark deity had a completely different meaning. But no matter how you brand the dark deities, this does not justify the burning of Kiefer's. In my opinion, you deservedly got your ass kicked. But I was sure that the dark deity was evil and tried to find at least some confirmation of this in my head. But all I found was a pitiless realization. Are we monsters? I'm afraid so. I'm really sorry. Fine, to start. So what? Is all that weird shit going on at the gas station because of you? He laughed again and shook his head, which I took to be a denial. Nope, I'll be honest with you. I don't understand half of what's going on. Your gas station is very strange, and even I don't know why. Rasnaruks and Kiefer's are my business. The smell I exude is also my fault, but all the rest of the game, no dude, even I don't feel comfortable with it. Take this glowing worm, for example. Horribly strange, isn't it? So, what will happen next? Next, I send you and your friends back upstairs and you stop killing me. This is my proposal. Will it suit you? Yes, I guess so. Fine. We need to seal this with a handshake. At that moment, a huge hand burst out of the wall and wrapped its fingers tightly around me. The next thing that happened was me on all fours on the street next to the gas station, spitting out the dirt. It was morning outside. Oh, good, Benjamin said. You got out too. I looked around and saw that everyone else was there too, covered in mud. We are back where it all began. The trees disappeared, as if they had never existed at all. The gas station resembled ruins. The doors were broken down, and the raccoons, like a train, dragged everything edible that they could find from the hall to their hole behind the building. What happened, dude? Asked Carlos. I'm not entirely sure, I answered, raking pieces of dirt out of my nose and ears.